This is the lecture video notes for Introduction to GIS at St. Charles Community College. This week we are going to work on address geocoding. So today I have loaded a couple of feature classes into a blank project. We're going to work on the process of geocoding, which is the ability to take a table that just has addresses in it with no geography and in essence apply geography to it. It's a very useful process. We do have to go through a couple of steps. As you'll find as we go through, it's not perfect, and of course it depends on the data that you're working with. So we'll actually go through a couple of issues that commonly come up and try to solve them as we go through. So as you found from the lecture notes, when you do a geocoding process, you need three components. The first of these components is what's referred to as a reference table. This is a table that has a series of addresses that do have geography associated with it. The data that you got with your GIS manual has a small reference table associated with the city of Atlanta. I have also added a reference table within the data that I have given you in addition to this. It's referred to here, St. Louis Metropolitan Streets 2012, just to remind you of where it is if you're having trouble looking for it. Of course, it's going to depend on wherever you loaded the data. I've put mine directly onto my desktop because there's more space there. Remember, you will have had to unzip your file, so it will be inside your unzipped file in the folder called Streets, and I believe it is the only file that's in there. So I've already added it here, you can see it, but if you're looking for it, that's where you will find it. If we open up this feature class, you'll find we need to look at a couple of things here. Within the database, you'll see that there are quite a few fields that we have here. Some of them are left blank because there's no data for them. Others are completed. You can see down at the bottom how many records we have, quite a few for this database. And keep in mind, this is just the St. Louis metropolitan area, and still we have over 306,000 records. There are a few fields that you're going to need to pay attention to. One of them is name. That's going to be the name of the street. And then unfortunately, much further along, this might be a circumstance where you want to move your fields around a little bit. We will have the fields left from, left to, right from, and right to. So again, from the lecture, remember, these are the fields that identify the address range on the left side of the street and then the address range on the right side of the street for any particular section of a road that you're looking for. So for example, if we pick this particular record, on the left side, the addresses run from 5331 to 5681. And again, we have to then scroll all the way back over here onto the road County Highway 27. So it gives us a very small section of each individual road. Every time there's a cross street, you get a new section. And then what we will do is match our addresses to it. Now again, just as a note, even though I have just been highlighting things to show you, I have made a selection, right? It has turned blue. So if I don't clear this selection, if I ask the computer to perform a function, it will only perform it on this record. So we always have to make sure to clear our selected features so that we have the entire database to begin with. The second thing that we need after we have our reference table, and note that I have my streets layer undrawn. If I click it to draw it, it will show up in my map, but you can see it takes a very long time to draw. There are a lot of records. So usually what I do is undraw this. It's still in the project, I can still work with it, but it just speeds things up so it doesn't have to redraw every time I perform an action. Excuse me. The next thing that we need is a database or just a table that has addresses in it. Now, you will have needed to have created a table before this point. I have done so, so we'll go ahead and find the data that I have already created. I've put it in my practice folder here inside a can. Remember, these personal geodatabases, for the most part, all tables need to be inside of them. Once you find the table that you've already created, you just select it and add. Now, just as a reminder, if you are in the process of making a table, remember you create the table in Catalog. I have Catalog open now. You would go to whatever can that you've created, and remember, if you need to make a personal geodatabase, you go to the folder above that, right-click, New, Personal Geodatabase, but we already have one, so on your personal geodatabase, you right-click, New, and Table, and then it takes you through that step process of setting up the structure or the shell of the table. You then complete that process in Catalog, and then you drag or pull your table into Map. You open up your table in ArcMap, and then you would need to populate it. As a reminder on how to populate it, I have already done so here, but you would need to have your editor toolbar. This is all review for you. I just want to remind you since we happen to be here. You start your editing process, identify which feature class, or in this case table, it is that you're interested in editing. You OK that. It will often give you a message that says things don't quite line up. Is that okay? You say OK, and then you type, right? I have a new record here. I could add one if I chose to. Since I don't need to do that, or when you are finished, you then stop editing. I didn't change anything, but normally it would ask if you want to save. You would say yes, and now you would have your database here. So now we have our second thing. First, you have your reference table, which is our set of streets. The second thing that you need is a table that has the list, in this case, of addresses that you want to geocode. So now we have the two of the things that we need. The third item that we're going to need is what's referred to as an address locator. This is just a little piece of software, really, that helps the computer understand how to make the connection between your table and the reference table. It is based in an enormous part on what data you have within your table. So for example, in this table, I have address, city, state, and zip code. So that's very helpful. Not all databases are so clean. Sometimes you just have zip code, or sometimes you just have the address, or something is missing. So I, not surprisingly, made one that would work smoothly, but you don't always have that, and that's what the address locator will help you with. Now, the address locator is created also within Catalog. Unfortunately, and I wish this were not the case, but unfortunately for address locators and for tables for that matter within the geocoding process, the computer likes it when things are fresh, when they have not been used. So even though I already have this personal geodatabase here, the computer sometimes will allow you to make one outside of the database, the personal geodatabase, but it often likes you to make a new one. So just so that we can be clean here, I'm going to go ahead and make a new personal geodatabase, and I will call it just for, probably no spaces, just for geocoding, so that we have one that's clean, so that if the computer requires it, we will be ready for that. So in my new personal geodatabase, I'm going to go into New, and then usually we've gone to Table here. We're going to go down to Address Locator. This will open up a new dialog box, which we can then complete. It's a fairly simple process. So the first option that we have here is the computer needs to know what type of data we have in our table. We will pretty regularly, in fact for this class, we will just use US addresses dual ranges. This just identifies that we will have data that we want separated on each side of the street, left and right. The next box here will request the location of our reference table. Remember, that's our St. Louis metropolitan streets, in this case 2012. So I just selected the Browse button here. It opened up a Browse box, and I just navigate to wherever that is. So again, I put that in Streets here. I just select it and add it, and it loads it for me. Now this will be a new feature class for us, so we need to save it to a safe place. So we're going to go ahead and go into our Just for Geocoding can, and we will call our address locator STL addresses, just so that we know what it is that we're looking at here. And then we'll save that and then OK this process. So again, what we are doing is we are creating a new connector. It's a way to connect the data in the table to the data that's in the reference table. You can tell that this process is working because you get this little scroll bar at the bottom, create address locator. This process does take a minute, so just be patient. Once the process is completed, you will get a little notification of that, and inside your new personal geodatabase you'll see a new little icon. It looks like a house that identifies that the address locator is ready to go. So now we have all three of the things. We have our reference table, which is our streets table. We have the table that has our data in it, and we've created our reference table. Excuse me, our address locator. So the geocoding process itself at this point is really quite simple. So we find, now that we've pulled our table into our project, we go to the table within the table of contents. Note that up here, if my first table of contents button is selected where it just shows the items that are drawable, you will not see the table because remember, it does not have any geography. We have to show the information based on where it is located because then it will identify the table itself. So if you don't see your table, make sure that you have the correct button selected up here. You want List by Source. We right-click on the table and very simply down to Geocode. Now at this point we need to find the address locator. Since we just created one, we actually have to go and get it. So we select the Add button, and then we have to go find the address locator that we just created. So we'll go back into our folder and our can that we just created, find the address locator, and add it. Once it gets added, it will automatically select, but then we OK that process. We then get a dialog box that asks us a few questions. It suggests some answers, but we need to verify. So it looks within the table itself and says, I need to find which field has street or intersection information. I found a field called address. Is that the correct one? If you have one field called address and one field called state, it might be confused. But otherwise, it defaults pretty easily. Then we have to, since we are creating a new file, we have to create a new name for it. I'm going to continue to save within the can that I just created, but I'm going to give it a better name and call it St. Chaz Parks Geocoded and save that. And once I've done that, then I just OK the process. As you can see, what it does is it looks through the items and matches as best that it can. For this case, it found 7 matches, but 2 of them it could not find a match for. So we need to go into the rematch box and see what the situation is. Under our status, that's where we look first. M stands for matched, and down here stands for unmatched. I'm going to go ahead and sort these so that they're together. So you can see that we found 2 that are unmatched. We'll need to finish this process in the next lecture, so go to the next lecture for the rest of this.